Hello guys, today let's look at how to validate form. This form is to capture the following data: last name, first name, other names, and up to brief description of the user. So we'll be using this to validate, we'll be making use of PHP to validate this form. The form was designed using Bootstrap 5. So this is a vertical form. What we have here is a vertical form. Let's look at the form. The opening of the form, method attributes is equal to post, and the action is left empty. Leaving it empty make this page vulnerable to cross-site scripting attack, and also it is not supported by HTML5 to leave the action attributes empty. So how can we prevent this cross-site scripting attack? We can leverage on the superglobal server php_self with HTML special cars built-in function to uh, ensure that this form is not vulnerable again to cross-site scripting attack. So, and we don't want to add code the name of the script. So that is a super global variable that I'm going to just show you now. PHP, open PHP tag and close it. Then within, let's look at this super global server. So we can make use of pre with print_r to display human readable formats of what is stored in this associative array. Super global server consists of many indices, but we want to just look at the few ones that we'll be making use of in this PHP form validation. So running this, so this is all the info in the super global server is an array, and it's an associative array, name, key, value. So this is the host and some other information, but we'll be making use of PHP_self. So this is what we use to get the value of this current script. This our form will be submitting to itself. In the later tutorial, we'll be looking at how to submit it to a different action page, but the action will be to itself in this form validation. So we can pick the script_name or PHP_self to pick the name of this current script. So we can use the PHP_self index, and also we make use of HTTP posts. We make use of the method is post, then we are using HTTP post protocol to send the data to this page. Likewise, we'll be looking at request_method to know if truly the user has submitted this form. Then the method will be get. When the user click on submit, on getting to this page now, from the URL, the address bar, the method, the request_method is get. But when I click on submit, what is in this super global, the request_method now is what? Is post. So we'll be making use of this to know when the user click on the submit button. So we can start validating this form by making use of the super global variables. But before that, We want to ensure that we don't leave this action feed empty. You can open PHP tag and close it. Then within, we want to display the content of what is inside PHP underscore self. And due to the fact that it's vulnerable to cross-site scripting attack, we need to make use of HTML special cars. So I'll be pointing you to PHP manual online for some of these built-in function. So that is HTML special cars that converts special character to HTML entities. So we'll be looking at how to use these HTML special cars. So with this, along with the super global server PHP underscore self index, we'll be able to resolve the issue of cross-site scripting attack. So you can get the script name by making use of PHP underscore self index air PHP underscore self. So if you proceed and echo this, then the value of this action will now be the what is stored in PHP underscore self in super global server array. So let's go back and refresh this page. So I'm sending the form data now. What we have in PHP underscore service resume slash form validation.php. So let's look at the uh, source code of this page. We go back and check the form method. This is where the form starts. You can see action equal to resume slash form validation.php. This is the what is stored in that PHP underscore self index. But this is vulnerable to PHP underscore self is vulnerable to cross-site scripting attack. And to prevent this, we need to convert HTML entity because the user that wants to create artwork can send in any HTML scripts, any HTML tags within whatever they are trying to use will be converted to HTML entity. So we can wrap this, you can make this to be, and you make use of HTML special cars, then you can convert the HTML entity within whatever they send to an HTML entities. So HTML special cars will convert any HTML tag here to HTML entity. We're going to look at another class to demonstrate all these security issues. But this is what is required to make this safe from any cross-site scripting. You can't leave this empty. It's not allowed in HTML5. You can't leave the action feed empty. So far, we want to send it to itself. You can't leave it empty. And as well, we don't want to hard code by typing form validation.php. We can get the name of this script from PHP underscore self. Then to prevent cross-site scripting, we are making use of HTML special cars, which is a built-in function that converts any HTML tags to HTML entity. So with this, we can proceed to submit the form. When you submit the form data is passed using HTTP post method. So we can proceed to validate the form here, and we are using the method we are using here is post. So all the form data, we can access it by making use of super global post or super global request. They will be readily available in these super globals. So when you let's proceed and run this afresh. So when you come to this page, you can see that the array, that super global array, is empty, nothing inside. But without filling the form, if you click on submit, then all these form feeds, you can see that the name of each of this feed, the last name feed, the first name feed, has name attributes, and that is what it will be used as the name key. And whatever value you put or you select will be the value here. Whatever data you put here will be the value here. Last name feed, first name feed, other names, and the rest. So let's proceed. Let's go back to the source code. So how can we know that the form is clicked? As I said before, we can leverage on this super global server. So we want to check if submit button is clicked. And how can we check? We can make use of the button, or since our method is post, we can make use of the super global variable. We're going to use simple if here. So and the condition if super global server index of request underscore method, if it is equal to post, that means the user has clicked the button. Then proceed to validate the form. Okay. So what we want to do after submitting the form, this is to validate a form. When you click on this submit button, then the form should be validated. So at this, what you just need to do is make use of the super global server. So the super global server, you want to check if submit button is clicked. Then you can make use of the simple if super global server request underscore method equal to post, then validate the form. So validate the form. To validate the form, we want to display all the form uh, errors at the top here. We want to display it at the top here, or display each error below the feeds. So we can do that. So we can create an empty array. We can create a variable errors as an empty array. Then with this, to validate the first feed, is still going to make use of simple if, and we'll be making use of empty uh, empty built-in function. It determines whether a variable is empty. Empty determine whether a variable is empty. So the form validation we are looking at today is looking at all these fields that are asterisk, they are required field. It must be filled. That is the first thing we are looking at. So let's proceed to check this out. So here our condition is if empty, then super global post index of last name if it is empty. So you have to put an index, the name key. So if it is empty, then you want to create associative array. You can now come here as error, then you create an index to store this array so that we can display this error under each feed. So I'm going to use here name for the last name. It means error last name. Then assign whatever error you want to message you want to pass across as the error message. That's a last name feed. is required, or last name field cannot be empty. So we're going to do the same thing for the first name and other required field. If you check this, email address, phone number, gender, date of birth, blood group, brief description are all asterisk. They are required. The only field that is not required is the other name field. And if you check while developing your form, for example, the last name field, type is equal to text, name equal to last name. You must have all your form elements must have name attributes with its value. Look at last name field. First name field has name attribute with first name. Other name as well as this. For you to capture data from form and send it to the server-side script, ensure that your form elements or your form elements has name attribute and it has value. Likewise, this is a group radio button, name equal to gender. So the radio button must have the same name value, gender here, and it must have uh, the value attributes with predefined data. So you can decide to check one, you can decide to make use of checked so that user have to choose. So you have a predefined uh, data, male and female, but you pre-check this so that when you run the form afresh, then this is selected. So user have to now click anyone they want to select as gender by, and you can see that this toggle due to the fact that they have the same name. So your form group, your radio button, group radio button must have the same name, but the ID must be different from each other. So you know that ID attributes must be unique. The ID attributes value must be unique. So also your drop-down field must have a name attribute. All the form elements must have name attribute because all these form elements name attribute is what will become the name key in the associative array. It becomes the name key. And whatever information you put inside, if the last name is Cook and the first name is Tim, then if I proceed to submit this, you see that it has created associative array, name key, value. This is the name key, fat arrow, then the value, name key, value. But if any of this doesn't have name attribute, then the information won't be captured and no data will be sent to the server-side script. Please take note of the form element name attribute. So let's proceed to validate this form. To validate this form, the last name field is empty. We store it in this uh, error last name ERR name field. Is an associative array. So we can do the same thing for other field that we want to validate. So we also want to validate the first name field. If it is empty, then we proceed by saying first name field is required or cannot be empty. Any other field that we don't need to validate the other names. Then the email address. So the email address field too needs to be validated. Then to validate email address, in the form field, what we use is email address. So then we check if superglobal post index of email address is empty. If it is empty, we need to create a name key value for it. Let's change the one for this first name to ERF name. Then this will be email, email. So we are creating this to store, to create an element in this array errors for each of the uh, form validation field, for each of the form element that we are validating. So here we are validating email address. Then we want to pass a message across that email address field is required if it is not filled. But how can we know if this is a valid email? Then we can use if statement to do this. The first thing is we are checking if email address field is empty. But if it is not empty, is the email field, is it a valid email? Then we can proceed by making use of else if statement. Else if what? This will make use of a filter. We have to use a filter this time around. In PHP, there is a filter underscore file built-in function. So this filter underscore file built-in function filters a variable with a specified filter. So there are specified filter. You can filter if a variable is boolean. You can filter if it is a URL. You can as well filter if it is email. So we'll be making use of this filter underscore validates email. So we make use of this filter underscore validates email. So we are to use filter underscore file to validate email address. So if this is an email address, to return true, but otherwise if it is not, it's going to return false. That is how it works. So it will return true if it is the return the filter data of false if the filter fails. This is the return values to return the filter data. So this is what we want to filter. Then it will return the filter data of false if the filter failed. So in our own scenario, we're going to make use of if not filter far, which means if it is false, then that is when we're going to print email address is not a valid one. So enter a valid email address. So the condition here will now be if not filter underscore far. This method is going to take our whatever we want to filter, which is this email address. Then what is the filter we want to use? Like I said, there are many filters, but we are making use of filter underscore validate email since it's email address we want to validate. So this will check if whatever is inside this variable, if it is an email. But if it is not an email, if it is an email, it will return it. If it's not an email, it will return false. So, and here we are checking if it is not. So we're going to still make use of the same index, but the message will be another message now. What we're going to put here is enter a valid email address, or email address is not valid. Email address is not valid. So with this, we'll be able to pass the message across to the user. Email address is not valid. So this is how to validate email address in PHP. So aside the email address, just going to validate phone number. Phone number, there are standard phone number formats based on ISO. So it can be number, it can have space, it can have country code, it can have brackets. So we see phone number as a string in this exercise. So we're just going to validate. Later we'll look at how to validate based on a specific format. But today we just validate it as not being empty. It's just to know that you supply a phone number feed. It shouldn't be empty. In order, this tutorial will be looking at how to validate it based on the standard of phone number we want to capture and store in our database. Okay, this is what we use now. Then we specify that phone number field is required. Then let's create error index for this so that we can use this to display the message below the phone number field. So let's just call it here phone number. So just that index. So we proceed to look at some other thing. We need to validate gender. So need to validate gender. So we can validate gender as well. And also do for gender. So gender, we say gender field is required. So come here and specify gender. But if you look at the gender field, we pre-checked the male value. So what if we remove this? We remove this, then we run this afresh. Try clicking the submit button. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 fields. Then if you check this out, the gender field is not being part of what we have here because it's not selected and it's not part of what we have here. So that is why we pre-checked one of the field to so that user have to now select one out of the two. So we can as well make use of if it's set to know if this is set. If it is not set, then we can now say gender field is required. So instead of using empty, we can check if this variable is being set. That is a built-in function called is set. It determines if a variable is declared and is different than null. So we can use that to validate the gender field if we don't want to pre-check any of the. So instead of empty, we can check if it's set. If not is set. Now we're going to negate it to make use of if not is set. So when it is not set, then we specify gender field is required. So if not is set, gender, then display this gender field is required. So that is how to validate a radio button that was not pre-checked. Okay, the other field, date of birth, block group, and brief description. You just want to ensure that the user fill this field. So let's proceed. It's the same pattern with the phone number. So we're just going to do that for this remaining field. The date of birth. So what we use there is DOB. You look at use DOB for date of birth. That is the index. And just say here DOB. Then date of birth field is required. Then also we do for the blood group, and what we use there is blood group. Then we can create the index for it so that we can have this stored in error array. So here we come here and say blood group field is required. And lastly is that brief description. The index, the name of the form is form name attribute. That form elements attribute is description. Then if it is empty, then we want to create these elements in errors array. This and specify that brief. If you look at what we have here, has description and it's brief description. So you can now proceed and say brief description field is required or cannot be empty. So if any of this is empty, what we're going to have in our errors field now will be this associative array: name key value, name key value, name key value, name key value, name key value. So we generate this name key in order for us to be able to display errors below each of these fields. So we're going to fill this form. We're going to just click on submit without filling this form and see what we have in the errors array now. So we are through with this. So I'm going to cut this out from here, and we use this to check out how many elements do we have in errors array. So here I'm going to put variable errors. So because we created errors variable as an empty array at the top here for validation. So each of the field has a unique error message using associative array. So let's proceed to run this form afresh. Then when you click on submit, we can see all this. Last name field is required, first name field is required, email address field is required, gender field is required. We didn't use empty here, we use if it is not set. We make use of a set to check because we didn't pre-check this. So we want to know if truly user has filled this. The user has not filled this or this required field. The only field that we didn't validate is other names field, but all the asterisk fields are validated. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields. So being validated here. Blood group. The blood group was already selected, but we can proceed to have a default option here so that we can also check if that blood group will be part of the error. So for blood group feed, we can put a default feed, which will be the first feed. So value will be to nothing. Then here we can put a message: choose blood group. So go back to the form and run it afresh. So nothing is filled. Nothing is filled. When you click on submit, you can see that blood group field is required as well. So we can print this message at the top here. After this form validation heading, the message can be displayed here. So we make use of for each. For each loop is the best loop for accessing elements of an array. So with this, we already know that there are errors on this page. So there are validation error. So here we can display all the validation error. We can display all the validation error. So what we just need to check is to know if that errors variable, these errors variables, we need to check these error variables. We need to check if it is set. If it is set, then that is when we're going to display whatever error we have here. So we open PHP tag here and close it. So within, we can proceed to make use of the conditional statement. Simple if. We want to check if it's set, super the variable errors, that errors variable. If it is set, then display error. And to display error, we have to look through the errors variable. Is an associative array. Associative array, name key value, name key value. So we want to display all errors at the top. So what we just need to make use of is for each. But let's display this error in another list. So we can echo our another list tag here, UL tag, You know, within UL tag, you're going to have your li. So let's close the UL tag here. After closing the UL tag inside, you can now look through what we have in error and print it using uh, for each. So for each variable errors as key value. So what will now be in the value now is the error. So we can display the error in our li. So coming here, we open li tag, then we close the li tag. Variable value, what we have inside is just a string now. Then and this will be passed inside a double quote. When you have a variable inside double quotes, it will be passed. So let's run this again to see if the error will be displayed after the form heading. You can see we have all this being displayed. Why this being repeated is because we didn't close the li tag. So when you close your li tag properly, let's run this again. Click this, you can see last name field is required and all these are required. So we can proceed to comment out this our print underscore r that help us to know what we have in variable errors. Then also we can leverage on bootstrap class to print this out in red color. You can specify it here, a class that is test-danger. So we are making use of the contextual classes to give this red color. Can you see? Last name field is required, first name field is required. So any of these that you didn't fill will be red in color. So uh, let's proceed and fill some of this form. Cook, Tim. Then you know Lee is not part of the field to be validated. When you click submit, you can see that last name and first name is not part of the result now. So I proceed to fill this form again to demonstrate email address team@mail.net, phone number 080 80 72 1800, just a demo. When I select mail, then date of birth, I'm just going to select any date just to test this. Okay, blood group, I select, but I didn't fill the brief description. When you click on submit, can you see that it's only brief description field is required because all these fields are not filled. Then later, we're going to look at how to retain form data so that when a user fill all the form, and just because one of the field is not filled, and all what the user has filled before disappear, then you need to retain the data so that it's only the field that is not filled that will be empty. We're going to look at that in the second part of this form validation. But for this is how to validate form. So after everything is okay, that it has satisfied all the validation rules, then what you just need to do here is to check if there are no validation errors. When you check when there are no validation error, how do you do that? Simple if we do that. So we need to check variable errors, and we need to check if it is empty, so we can make use of empty function. If variable errors, if it is empty, then now proceed to process the form data. So at this point, the form data may decide to sanitize it before you use it. Maybe you want to send it, you want to insert into a table, database table, or you want to send mail, or whatever you want to do. This is where you proceed to do it. So we're going to stop here on form validation. Once again, let me fill the form again. When everything is okay, if there is no any validation error, it will display uh, this message. Let's just say process form data. To me, that is what we want to print here, process form data. But also, we only display this form here. How can you display it below? How can you display the error message below? Then we're going to leverage on if it sets each error, each field has its own error index in this errors array. The error index for last name field is here how name, like name, F name, email. So we're going to use this to display the error. So we can pick this index, this variable, and use it to display the error below instead of just displaying everything at the top. So below these form elements, input type equal to test, name equal to last name, then you can check by opening PHP tag and you close this, and from there you proceed by checking first if it is set, because if it is not set and you just display this, it's going to throw error. What I mean is that if you just echo what is stored here, when you first run this form, then you're going to have these undefined variable errors, because this is only defined when you click on what submit button. That is when this uh, error variable is defined. But when you first come to this form, you run it, then that will be, so that is why you need to check if it is set, if it is defined, if it is set before using it. So we need a simple if here to check if it sets this variable error. If it is set, then that means you can proceed to uh, display whatever is stored inside this variable. So we may decide to make use of a div, a block level or any block level elements here, so that we can style this error message. So a double quote here, put a div inside, then you close the div. So we have the variable, so you can make use of Bootstrap. We are using Bootstrap. Can make use of Bootstrap contextual class to give this color red, test dash danger. So looking at this with this passed, so if this won't pass, all what we can do here is we can do concatenation. So we can concatenate this variable with this string, and you know anything in double quotes is referred to as string in PHP. So if you go back and refresh this page, you submit, you have the form error message below the last name. So the same thing is what we need to replicate for last name feed if you want this to be below. And likewise, we have to do this for all, making use of the index. This is F name. Then if there is an error, you didn't fill this field, then let it display this below. Let it display this below. Then you do this for other field as well. So other names field is not required. Email address field, you do the same thing to print the uh, error for it. If there is error, you do it for phone number, you do it for gender as well, so that I can display this inline. You do it for date of birth, ARDOB, do it for blood group. This is the index, error array index, then for description. When you run this afresh and you didn't fill any of these required field, then below each of the form elements, aside other name that is not required, you can see that those error message in the errors field. Blood group field is required, date of birth field is required, gender field is required. So you can choose to do it this way by displaying it at the top, or the field that is required, if there is any error, you should display it at the top, and you can also display it by the side. So when you store the errors in an array, it's make it easier for you to use it and display the error below the form element, below the specific form element. I'm going to comment this out so we can see the form errors below each of this. So with this, you can see that we have the error below each of this form. So if you fill this form now, I fill the email address field, then you click on submit. So it's sending it to itself. So all these are filled, but we didn't retain the data. In the next exercise, we look at how to retain form data. How to retain form data in the next exercise. So with this, you've seen how to validate form. After the validation is okay, then you can begin to process the form data. If you want to send it, insert it to a table. So this is where you now process the form data. So with this, we are rounding off on this part on form validation. So if you make use of built-in function empty, make use of a set, we also look at HTML special class to prevent any issue of cross-site scripting, because PHP underscore self is vulnerable to XSS attack, cross-site scripting attack. Then we've resolved that using HTML special class. Look forward to the next uh, tutorial on how to retain form data while validating the form using PHP. Thank you. You can subscribe to this channel